Just 1 second. Go ahead.
Okay. Our mission, Helping Parents Heal, is a nonprofit organization dedicated to assisting bereaved parents. Through support and resources offered, we aspire to help individuals become shining light parents, meaning a shift from a state of emotional heaviness to one of hopefulness and greater peace of mind. Helping Parents Heal goes a step beyond other groups by allowing the open discussion of spiritual experiences and afterlife evidence in a non-dogmatic way. Helping Parents Heal affiliate groups welcome everyone, regardless of religious or non-religious background, and encourage open dialogue. Attendance at all Helping Parents Heal meetings is voluntary. All discussions that take place at affiliate-led meetings are confidential. We hope that participants will learn from and share with each other. Zoom meetings run by leadership are not confidential. These meetings typically feature guest presenters and are posted on YouTube so that affiliate members worldwide can watch and benefit. Neither type of Helping Parents Heal meeting is designed to replace traditional therapy or spiritual counseling. Helping Parents Heal offers a wide variety of speakers, allowing parents to learn about many possible ways to heal. This includes presenters covering progressive topics such as afterlife evidence and connecting with our children who have passed. The views expressed by our guest speakers may or may not reflect the opinions of Helping Parents Heal leaders and members. So we ask that you take from their presentations whatever may benefit you personally. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad you're with us. And thank you, Curtis, for being here.
Yes, thank you, Curtis. We're thrilled. And thank you, Irene, for reading that. And Curtis has a very short bio for a very wonderful person. I mean, he's so much fun to listen to. Curtis Childs is the host and producer of the weekly program Swedenborg and Life, which has accumulated more than 30 million views and nearly 120,000 subscribers on YouTube. Curtis has appeared on numerous spirituality-themed talk shows and has had his content featured on the Dr. Oz show. He works with his team at the nonprofit Swedenborg Foundation to create simple, effective inquiries into life's biggest questions. He has also been a guest on Brian's podcast, Grief to Growth, and he was also a recent guest on Helping Parents Heal. I'm going to go ahead and post all of his different websites. And without further ado, please join me in welcoming Curtis Childs. Welcome, Curtis.
Thank you. It's great to be back. So the first time must have gone okay if I got this invite back. So I really enjoyed getting to visit with some of you who are here now. And I know there's some new faces as well. Thank you for sharing this time with me. I wanted to introduce a little bit about myself and the work that I'm doing and how I feel like it relates to the mission of Helping Parents Heal. I loved getting to just hear that the mission statement and the literature read in the beginning, because there's so many really wonderful things in there. I love the idea of we gather and talk about things and take from it what you want. I love the idea of adding an inquiry into a life after death to dealing with grief. I mean, I know as I mentioned last time, when I was here, when I was younger, when I was 6 years old, I had a sister who was 8, and our family got into a car accident, and so she died. And so in my little kid way, I had a sense of what my parents were going through, and I know now even more with it filled in the role that their belief in a life after death, and even some spiritual experiences that people we knew had involving my sister, what a difference that made. And it didn't take away the grief, but like was just said a minute ago, it can create hope and a new approach to life. So I think that was my experiences with that were part of how I really got interested in the work that I'm doing now. So I work for the Swedenborg Foundation, and that's a funny sounding name for an organization, and it's because it's named after a guy who had a funny sounding name, but a really, really fascinating and important life. So that's his name is Emanuel Swedenborg, and he lived hundreds of years ago. It was the time period we'll be talking about was when he was in his 50s, and it was like the 1740s. But it's good that he lived that long ago, because it makes what he had to say so much more important in rounding out our picture of life after death, because this was long before people talked about near-death experiences. This was actually before there was even really a common perception that you kept on living as you after death, after the death of the body. And a lot of the thought at the time, especially among the intellectual class, was that when you die, you become some kind of disembodied piece of thought, or you're something off in the ether. Whereas I think these days it's much more common. No, you see it portrayed in movies and TV shows all the time. You die and you wake up and you're, oh, I'm still me. I'm in a room, or I'm in a field. Like, there are places, but that wasn't always the case, that the people really believed that. But Swedenborg has this fascinating body of knowledge written down, where he confirms exactly that. And a lot of the things we're hearing now from people who have these modern near-death experiences, where they talk about the way that life continues from one world into the next, Swedenborg wrote stuff that was so similar to that in Raymond Moody's book, who wrote Life After Life, who came up with the term near-death experience. He had a whole section about Swedenborg in there, which was very exciting to me as a humble Swedenborg enthusiast. And I feel like Swedenborg's material has been so helpful to me in everything. It was helpful to me even as a kid. My parents were readers of Swedenborg, so I knew that it was helpful to me to hear about the life after death that he described, and imagining my sister there. When I'd be going to sleep, my dad, he got the ideas actually from his sisters, who had come out to kind of help our family when we were grieving. But he would take me, and I had a younger sister, and he'd say, do you want to go on a trip to heaven? And he would kind of talk us through almost like a guided meditation, but we would imagine, well, we're going to visit Annika, and this is where she lives, and this is what she's like, and this is what she's wearing, this is the house that she's in. And to me, it felt real. It felt absolutely real. I'm thinking, in a kid's mind, I would imagine that kids are a little more tuned into what the other side is like, and maybe some of that was really coming through. But so I think it's really cool that you have this confirmation from long ago, but also from somebody who was at the cutting edge of science. Swedenborg was a celebrity scientist. He was in the newspapers. He was at the leading edge of all these fields of study, and he started to have these experiences of life after death, and that there's more to life. And he decided, I'm going to just publish it all. And a lot of people thought it was weird. He talked about how, yeah, the afterlife continues. You can actually talk to the people who are there. He called people on the other side spirits. And he said, I can talk with these spirits, and they're people just like we were then. He describes this world that is both really similar to the one we have, but then also really different in key ways. And so it was through understanding that world that I got to know that my sister, who died when she was 8, that she was still 8 in the other world, and she from there continued her journey of growth. Like, she grew up, she had education, she had friends, she ended up, much later meeting somebody and falling in love, and that she had a life just like I had a life. I didn't know the details of it, but knowing that, I miss her. But I feel like I'm saving up this, like, wow, when I get to see her again, I have this kind of, like, when I get to see her again. So I think that's been part of the value that Swedenborg has brought to me, and I find the more that I learn about the way the afterlife is and works, and I augment what I learned in Swedenborg with all kinds of other near-death experiences, but the more that it makes sense and becomes real to me, the more it gives me that hope that you're talking about. So that's a bit of the intro of me and what I'm doing. And so, yeah, I'm happy to go wherever you'd like to take it from here.
That's wonderful. Oh my goodness. And I just think that it's fabulous that your dad was doing those guided meditations with you and taking you to meet Annika. And I think that it's important for everyone to understand that. For me, I think that in many cases, these siblings who have a brother or sister who has passed frequently are what a lot of people call indigo children, or they call them all different names, but they definitely have a very deep and close connection to their brothers or sisters on the other side. And a lot of times those are the kids who shape our world. They're the ones who are wanting to get out there and help others. And I think that that's what you've done, Curtis, which is just wonderful. And I would love for you to talk a little bit more about what Swedenborg believes, so that people who might have missed your talk last time, obviously, um, as you were saying, he must have had a near-death experience or more than one near-death experiences to be able to talk about everything that was in all of his works. But could you talk a little bit more about Off the Left Eye and just explain that whole concept? Because that is what your YouTube channel, I guess,
Yeah.
is entitled. Is that right? Is the YouTube channel is called Off the Left Eye?
Yes. Okay. So the reason my YouTube channel is called Off the Left Eye was because 12 years ago now, when I was deciding, okay, I want to tell people about Emanuel Swedenborg and this, and it's not even really about him as a person. It's really just about this amazing vision of how life is much better than we think it is and much more expansive. And I thought, well, who's going to want to listen to this? Who's going to want to listen to this on YouTube? So what do I call my channel? And I flipped open one of his books and I just was looking for a phrase, and it was his, yeah, and one of the first things I came across was Off the Left Eye. And I thought, that sounds kind of cool. It sort of sounds like what you'd name your band. And no one's gonna have any associations with it either way, so I'm gonna take it. And it turns out to be a really good phrase for our channel to be named after, because it is about something that happens to you after you die. So Swedenborg, yeah, he's fascinating because he didn't just have a near-death experience. He had 30 years of continuous spiritual experiences, according to his journals that he kept and his records. So when he was in his mid-50s and at the sort of the height of his scientific career, he had a series of what began as dreams, but then became more and more lucid, and then more and more meaningful, and then became more and more happening beyond the bounds of night. He started to have experiences in wakefulness. He had this really powerful vision where he met God, or met Jesus, and who he believed that is God, and it totally changed the trajectory of his life. And that he said, what he said was that his spiritual eyes were opened. He says that you all have a spirit. This is getting into what he believes. We have a spirit, and we are humans because of our spirits, not because of our bodies. And your spirit is human, so it looks like a person. It has all the parts that a person has, because our body is kind of modeled after that rather than the reverse. So you all have a spirit, and that spirit has eyes, and it has ears. It has everything that your body has, but those eyes are closed usually because we're so focused on what's going on, what we're seeing through our physical eyes. But under the right conditions, anyone's spiritual eyes can get opened. And so once his were, he became aware of this world, and it never left. So every day he was having spiritual experiences that he could navigate and control, and he was making all these connections. And he believed that he had this sort of mission he was being given to tell people that there is a life after death, and give people a sense of what it is, so that they don't have to live sort of in the dark. And what he so Off the Left Eye, that phrase, I was like, wait, where am I going with this? Off the left eye is this story of, he said he was, the thing that comes closest to a classic near-death experience for him was, he said at one point I was shown what the dying process is like. He didn't have a physical threat to his health like you will find with a number of near-death experiences, but he says I was shown what it was like, but I was kept conscious enough that I could remember it and write it down later. And he said that, so first he was brought into a state where his physical body became almost inoperative and his breathing slowed until there was really almost no breathing physically. But he said his spirit was still breathing. There was a slight spiritual breath going. And from there, he could feel his body get pulled out of, or his spirit get pulled out of his body. And then he described the process of his spirit awakening to the reality of the spiritual world. Because it's not like your spirit has to go to the spiritual world. It's already there. He says that a direct quote from him is, the spiritual world is right where we are, not distanced from us in the least. Because just like you have a body and your body's here, mine is in the room that used to be our garage, but we got it converted. Right? That's where my body is. Your spirit is somewhere. It's there, right? It's already in the afterlife right now. It's as a spirit. So he was really just becoming aware of his spiritual surroundings. And in the process of doing that, he said that he was met by what he called angels. And what he meant by that, though, was just people like you and I who have crossed over and have sort of developed to the next stage of love and wisdom. So just like here, you're a baby and then you become a toddler and then an adolescent, an adult, and you keep getting more and more capable. And if we're on the right track, you become more and more wise and discerning and potentially loving. I mean, you can see there's some people who are old people and just so sweet and wise at the same time. They have this sort of innocence of wisdom. Well, angel is like the next phase of that. So as you continue to grow in love and wisdom, you become into this amazing state that I think people encounter a lot in near-death experiences. And Swedenborg called those angels. So it's you and me, in our next phases. And he said that initially he was surrounded by angels who are what he called celestial or heavenly angels. So these are people that are really, really focused on love and are very, very open to the divine. And they were around him, and just the presence of angels can really affect you. So that what they were doing with their presence was easing his transition and protecting him, making sure that nothing that wasn't loving came into his mind or into his heart, keeping him in good thoughts and good feelings. And as he started to stir, he said a different group of angels came around him. And these were what he called spiritual angels. So these were people who are focused on the truth and focused on wisdom. And there's these different, people have these different interests and focuses, just like we do in the world. And they play these sort of complementary roles. So you have some who are focused on love, some who are focused on wisdom. So these wisdom ones, he said that it seemed like they rolled the covering off of his left eye. And that gave him the use of spiritual sight. And that everything, there's a lot of symbolism and meaning and actions in the afterlife. So it doesn't mean that there was literally something they peeled off his eye, but it gave there was like an image of that portrayed, which was a picture of how he was gaining the use of his spiritual sight. So the channel off the left eye is, we're trying to give spiritual sight in that we give what we believe are truths. And the truth is like the spiritual equivalent of light. So the more truth we have, the more we see reality as it is. So it's kind of like, we'll give you some little, lights, and that's sort of associated with the left or the intellectual side. The right side or the love side, the go and do side, that's up to each of us to go do individually. You can't do that over YouTube videos. It's up to us to go take the ideas and put them into our lives. So that's what off the left eye means. And there's a little more of what Swedenborg found when he crossed over. And so I always think whenever somebody I love dies, and I think of recently of when I was talking about old people that are so wonderful and nice, I was thinking about my mom's mom, so my grandmother, Donnette, who's actually in a few of our Off the Left Eye videos. She died not that long ago. And so whenever somebody dies, I've got this sadness, but I'm also thinking like they're going to be when I wake up, they're going to be right there. I know they're going to be right there. I can just picture her like there already. So that's some of the immediacy and the closeness that Swedenborg found. The two worlds are right next to each other. There's not this huge space in between.
Yeah,
Well,
that's great.
Go ahead, Irene.
Yes. So
think-
Curtis, when I watched the video again, and I love this video, and I encourage everybody to go onto your YouTube channel, but I love the video. What can we expect when we cross over? I think it's just wonderful. And I was wondering if you could spend some time and talk to our members about that.
Sure. We have 1,000 videos, like I said before we started. So I don't know if I know exactly what points are in that one, but I know what we can expect when we cross over. So Swedenborg, there's a quote from a guy named Kenneth Ring, who was a co-founder of IANS, or the International Association for Near-Death Studies. And he said, people who have had a near-death experience have peeked through the door into the afterlife, but Swedenborg explored the whole house. And I think that's true. I've read extensively near-death experiences and Swedenborg, and I think what Swedenborg doesn't give you is that vivid, modern, clear emotional picture of just how impactful it is. I think you can find that in his amazingly inspiring and uplifting descriptions from people nowadays. But Swedenborg does give you this structure and this big picture that helps you fill so many things out. And I think that's what he can really contribute to our study of what the afterlife is. And so he talks not only about that moment of crossing over, but then what happens next, and what happens after. What kind of lives do we live? What is it like to be a person day to day in the afterlife? So after that initial welcome or initial awakening that I was talking about, he says that everybody is met and welcomed by angels. And he says that in that state, they render us every service we could hope for. And they say, what do you want? How can we help you out? How can we take care of you? He talks about people who are wanting to see things, and so the angels take them over and show them amazing sights. A lot of people have questions about ethics. What is the good life? What am I supposed to live? What's the truth about religion? And it seems like everybody just gets all the answers. Even people who have misguided opinions about what makes you happy. There's this whole beginning to one of his books where there's all these people who had sort of misguided opinions about what's happiness. Some people thought, well, what I would really love, what would be happiness for me, would be if everybody served me and I was like some kind of king or something. And the angels will say like, okay, well, you want to go try it? And they'll let the person try it until they realize that, oh, this is hollow. This is not what happiness is. And then slowly they'll lead them into this understanding that true happiness, what Swedenborg calls heavenly happiness, is the joy in helping, is the joy in doing something useful for other people. And that's the thing that you can actually build a happy life around. But it's not, it's just the center of a happy life. Life is very full there. He talks about people after this initial period where the angels are saying, what do you want to do? People are allowed to go and do whatever they want. And there is this pull, though, inside of people that leads them to their spiritual home. So we have a spirit right now, and really what makes us who we are. And he says that everybody is absolutely unique, that each of us have a heart and a mind, or a way of feeling and a way of thinking that nobody else has ever had and nobody ever will have to eternity. But everybody is their own love and their own wisdom. And that love that really makes us who we are, it sort of like gravity pulls things together physically. It pulls you into a community with other people who have a similar kind of love to you. He says that when you get to this community, and he describes it like sometimes people will go and travel from place to place, and start see like where I don't quite feel like I'm at home. It's sort of led by this sort of the hand of the universe, or what Swedenborg would call it, divine providence, to eventually be somewhere where, which is your home with a capital H. This is when you get there, it says that you feel like you've known these people, even if you've never met them, since childhood, since forever, because of the similarity and love that you have. This is a place where there's a particular place for you, like you have a house, but everything spiritually is here in the physical world. The stuff we see around us is a reflection of physical laws. So, like I said, gravity arranges things, physics arranges things. Why am I in a room right now? Well, because at some point people came and stuck some things together, and that's why you have a room. But spiritually, everything comes from our hearts and minds. So the home that you have, even the appearance of the land around you, matches what's inside you and kind of springs from that. So the home that people go to, you eventually end up in a house that is like the perfect reflection of who you are. So it's like your dream home, and it actually continues to grow and develop as your mind grows and develops. There's always kind of new things being put in, and you can tell by the way that it changes, that your mind is changing. The things are very linked there. So you come into this state where you have a community that you get along with. In preparation for that state, there's usually like a sorting out where you, if you're focused on what's good and true, you get a chance to be freed of what is negative and false that's holding you back. The spiritual world is very much, there's not really, you can't just like, I'm going to act one way, but really I'm a different way. You get into an integrity about who you are and what you have. And it's all done through these sort of elegant steps that allow us to make those discoveries. And then once you're in that community, you start to find a way to help the human race, and you do something that serves the greater good, and that gives you all kinds of satisfaction. And then there's all kinds of recreation and things as well. People have parties and concerts and adventures and all that, but it's all in service of continuing to grow in love and wisdom and continuing to serve the human race in whatever way you can, because that's what brings the deepest joy. So there's a picture of what we can expect, that Swedenborg laid out.
And also, well, if you're talking about you can create your own home or rooms that you go to. I mean, I have an amazing kitchen right now, but my kitchen in heaven is just going to be absolutely incredible. I loved when you talked about the joyful reunions. Can you just spend a little time when Swedenborg talked about joyful reunions?
Yeah, I can't imagine a more amazing outpouring of emotion than people reuniting. And especially, there's plenty of people who never would have thought that they'd see their loved ones again. And even for someone who, like myself, who says, yeah, I believe it, to actually experience it would be on a whole other level. And so Swedenborg talks about these joyful reunions, and he talks about how in the spiritual world, thought brings presence and love brings union. So when you get there, just your longing to see the people that are there brings you right to them. It's not like you have to go and look up in the phone book, like, where do they live and are they going to remember me? Like, that love brings you right there. And there's even the opportunity to sort of build back relationships and mend things that need to be mended. He has this fascinating account of there was two brothers and their parents who had all gotten into the afterlife, and one of the brothers had died young, and so had been in the afterlife, but the other brother had just died, and the brother who had just died had actually become kind of hardened and abrasive in his life, and it caused a rift with his parents. But Swedenborg saw this amazing scene play out where the brother who had who had died first came up to the older brother and was like, hey, I love you so much. And the brother who hadn't died had a bunch of resentment because he's like, well, you died young, and so everyone cared so much about you. And the brother who had died was like, listen, all I want to do is give you all the happiness that I could possibly have. And this moves his brother to tears, and it kind of melted the ice between him and his parents. And there's all these opportunities. There's even times when people can be brought sort of into more childlike states, so people can understand sort of why they are the way they are and where they're coming from. So there's reunions, and there's healings, and there's just opportunity to connect in a way like we never had before.
Beautiful. That's really beautiful. I also wanted to ask you, because I found this so fascinating, when you talk about the expansive state of our mind after we die, and that the mind has the 3 levels. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Well, those angels I was talking about before, the heavenly angels and the spiritual angels, there's a lot of levels that Swedenborg talks about, but the levels aren't levels like stairs or like levels of a house. He talks about you're able to open different levels in your mind. And by levels, think of it more like there's the level of, if you're looking at the human body, which he says that all of heaven is in a form like the human body. So if you look at the way you're built physically, you can see kind of what the afterlife is like. So if you think about your heart, you can just look at it. If you just could see it with an X-ray, you can just, okay, there's a heart. That's one level. But if you can zoom in, you can see on the next level in, there's tissues. It's actually all made up of tissues, and it's only by those tissues moving that you're able to get this amazing thing. But if you look even closer, you can see those tissues are made up of individual cells. So it's really like levels of magnification. He says you can have the first level of your mind opened, which is just a basic acknowledgement of love and wisdom and what it is to be good to the neighbor. But then you can have it opened on the second level, which means all the parts that make up those parts, all these little truths and kindnesses. It's a really informed opening. But it can go even farther to what he calls the heavenly or the celestial level, where you just see, you get to a point where like being kind and loving is just instinct. You see things exactly as they are. It's absolutely clear that love is the most important thing in life, and how to act on it. And that's when the mind is fully opened and open to the divine, which is kind of like the sun beaming out love and wisdom all the time, and you become fully open. You're like a green tree. It's like I'm sucking in all that good photosynthesizable light and heat from there. And the mind, the way that your mind can expand never ends. He talks about, you never stop growing. It doesn't matter how long you've been there. There's never an end to the amount of love and wisdom that you can be perfected in. And this is why angels get to be so amazing, because if you just get to keep learning and keep learning and keep growing, you get to do amazing things. And the mind also expands horizontally. In the afterlife, you can like directly share joy with somebody else. So if you're having a good feeling, not just I can smile at you and tell you, but you can feel my joy, thoughts, and when you can get into a group of people and suddenly you know everything they know. Like there's like people talk about knowledge downloads in near-death experiences. There really is a direct sharing of minds there, and that's part of what makes it so joyful, is because you really are. I talked about the human body. It's organized like a human body, where every little part of it and every little cell is all working together for the good of the whole, and it's all getting everything it needs from the whole. So there's this total interdependent community there. And just like that, you can, when you're feeling healthy, it's funny because right now my family's actually got COVID, so we're like not feeling totally healthy, but it makes you appreciate when you do have it. You just know like every bit of you is happy, and happy from the whole. And that's what the joy of what Swedenborg called heaven is this connection, because the minds are all, everyone's connected by minds, everyone's connected by hearts and by love. And that connection keeps getting better and better as more of us get into the afterlife. Because each person who gets in there is like this ideal link between two or more parties that didn't have that before. So it gets better and better the more of us go there.
That's amazing. I was going to ask you two different things. First of all, I think it's fabulous that obviously way back when Swedenborg was writing, he was talking about the fact that you can travel between these two worlds. So when you're sleeping, you might be over there. And obviously you spend time over there when you're asleep. For instance, it's interesting because George Anderson has talked about a mom going over to the other side and meeting her son, who has told her, this is him telling the mom that she was there to meet him when he transitioned. So she was already there. So the fact that we can be in many different places at the same time is fascinating. And I personally feel like I spend time with my two kids when I go to sleep. I don't necessarily remember the interaction, but I wake up feeling like I've been with them. So that's something that's something that it really strikes me. But also, when you're talking about the home that you are looking for, that you go from place to place until you find the people that resonate with you, I am constantly feeling, and I think that so many of the mediums and the people from the afterlife community who speak to helping parents heal feel that all of our kids are together, that they join together to watch these meetings, that they spend time together, that they are all friends, and they are helping us to learn how to connect with them. And so that really resonates, that when Morgan transitioned, first of all, Chelsea had transitioned, then Morgan transitioned, I really felt in the very beginning, wouldn't it be nice to just have an island someplace where we could all live, who have all experienced the passing of a child, not just the parents, but also the siblings, because I know that for you, you probably felt very alienated from all of your friends because they hadn't been through the same experience that you had been through with your sisters. So the idea that we find that home, I know that home exists. I can feel it so clearly. Actually, I get goosebumps when I think about it, that all of our kids are together and that they're part of that one home, which is such a beautiful image. And I don't know if you have anything to say about either of the two things that I've said. They're not really questions. They're more just statements about what you were saying. So also, we have some people typing in questions. Roseanne is asking, how were his ideas, so Swedenborg's ideas, received during that time, during the time that he was alive?
Yeah, they mixed reviews in the time that he was alive. Well, what do you think would happen if you had someone, think today, if some famous scientist said, hey, I've started talking to people on the other side, and I'm going to write down what I heard. So plenty of people mocked him and said he was insane or that he was just making it up. He got in trouble with the church in his day, that the church was the government, and you weren't allowed to say things that went against the doctrine. And he was saying, like, no, you people of all religions can go to this heavenly state. And so he got, his works actually got put on trial for that in Sweden. He had to go to other countries to publish because he wasn't allowed to publish them in Sweden. So there was some of that. There was some people who really loved it, and there were people who found it compelling and who had it have a huge impact on them. And he, even though I think he he was wishing more people would listen. I mean, the main thing it was just like crickets. Like I remember he wrote in this letter that he had, when he first published his first one of these spiritual books, he'd published a lot of scientific books before, but his first spiritual book, he wrote that he said, I received word today that we had sold not more than 4 copies in 2 months of this first book. And it's funny because he says that he told the angels, he was with angels at the time. And he said, I told them this and they were surprised. And he said, well, it's people aren't usually interested in this kind of thing, and we just got to leave it up to the divine to sort it out. So I think he continued to the end of his life to really just try to get anyone to listen. So he would put his books in the hands of religious leaders and academic leaders and state leaders, because he had all these connections and got some people to listen. I think overall, it was definitely I think he was feeling that, like, hey, this is such important stuff. Why don't people want to listen? Why don't people want to hear this sort of thing? So I think it was mixed reaction, but there's been, ever since Swedenborg's time, there's been sort of small but larger than you might think influence on culture and thought from his material. So I think the part of what the Swedenborg Foundation is doing is trying to continue that original mission. Hey, we've got to tell people about the reality of the other side and the reality of love, and that physical death is not the end of love.
He must be very proud of you for continuing his mission. That's wonderful.
I hope so. I hope we're doing it right.
Well, I wanted to ask you something, and I guess that the question lies in whether or not you do believe, and Swedenborg believes in this too. Sue is asking, you spoke about how everyone continues to grow, learn, age, experience on the other side. Does anyone know what happens to the aging and growth of our previous incarnations? So this is assuming that you believe in reincarnation. Do they stop once a new incarnation begins?
Yeah. So, and this is something that that I get asked about a lot, but it's, from what I can tell in Swedenborg's works, he seemed to believe that the growth and change, and even some of the characteristics that people describe happening in reincarnation, don't happen by physically reincarnating, but they happen within the spiritual world in those cycles. So he likens it to, you have 9 months in the womb, and that's like it's sort of like you're living a different kind of life, but you're growing this body that's going to be the foundation. And then after you're born, then your life really begins. And there's all this progress and change, but it's all based on how you developed in the womb. I mean, not all of it, but if you had some kind of congenital defect, that stays. So it was that the physical, the life we're living here physically is like our life in the womb. So we're setting out the basics of who we are and what we love, and then we go on to this afterlife where a lot of stuff that is like the reincarnation that people describe happens. We actually did a show called "Do We Reincarnate?", where we gathered all the things he says that are similar to it. He never indicates that he believed that you come back as a person again, or as a different person in the world, but he does talk a lot about these same sort of cycles, and even stuff like karma and law of attraction kind of things happening within the spiritual realm. So to him, it was like you continue to grow and change forever, but the change is, the fluidity is on the spiritual side rather than spiritual back to physical and back to physical.
Well, I'll tell you, a lot of us would feel very, very happy to hear that we don't have to do this again. So if that's what Swedenborg believes, I think that makes our lives a lot easier. I'll tell you, a lot of times, especially with what has gone on in our lives, having a child pass, don't want to have to do this again. But
Yeah.
so interesting to hear that. So Ranjina is saying, this is very interesting. My son had talked about 2 angels visiting him since he was about 2 years old, after his first cancer diagnosis, until his 5th cancer diagnosis, when the visitations stopped. So is that something that Swedenborg talks about as well, that other people experience these angels that visit them?
People have always the spiritual world comes through. It comes through. It's right there, and people from ancient times on up have had these sorts of experiences. So Swedenborg even talks about, you know, the whole of Europe at his time was really Christian and looking at the Bible. He's like, well, look, there's people having spiritual experiences in there too. It's just what happens. And so he said we have two angels with us all the time. He said, I talked before about how we're unique people because we have our own heart and our own mind. It's different than anybody else. And he actually says we have sort of an angel with our heart and an angel with our mind. Like, you know, I talked before about the heavenly angels and the spiritual angels kind of being wisdom focused and love focused. Each of us have one of those with us all the time. And if you didn't have those, you couldn't have consciousness. That's part of the way that we live. It doesn't mean that you're limited to two, but there's always spirits and angels around us. And so the idea that you would be able to see them, especially in a time of distress, because that's when we're kind of open to like, well, what's going on, and especially if, to be a child. I think that he says that we're more surrounded by higher angels in childhood. That's why childhood is as fun as it is and magical as it is. So that it makes all the sense in the world that, you know, that person would have that come to them. That it's a reality that's there for all of us all the time. We just can't always see it.
That's beautiful. Oh my goodness. How wonderful to hear that. And Wendy's asking something that I think I already know the answer to, and I think you probably would be able to answer this and reassure her. Will our children be a part of our home with us on the other side as they were here before they passed?
Yeah. So Swedenborg talks about families living together just as they did in the world. So think about how we're able to gather here like this. We're all over the United States, probably more, but because we have this common interest, we're able to just be here instantaneously like this. There's nothing like this in the time I'm talking about, like this, like the internet is doing this for us right now. There was nothing like that in the time that Swedenborg was writing, but he described a spiritual world that works a lot like that. So Canada, okay, my Catherine's from Canada. My dad was born in Canada. I grew up in Detroit, so we would always go across Ontario to Lake Huron for vacation. So I love Canada. I'm going there next summer. So we're able to connect just by wanting to, just by thinking about it. Basically, that's how it is on the other side. So love brings you together, and thought brings, love brings union, thought brings presence. So the love that you have for your children and the similarities that you have, just because of the, you know, you're just sort of just like physically, and you inherit stuff, you inherit spiritual stuff too. That's going to bring you together. The love you have brings you together, and you're going to be able to live close to them. And there's not even really distance in the spiritual world like there is here, because it's more like the internet, where it's like, oh yeah, if you love someone, they're right there with you.
That's beautiful. Yes, of course, it's going to be easy. I think that they're going to be the first ones who meet us when we get over there anyway. And if they have any trouble, there's lots of friends, as I say, in this group that can help them. But it's interesting. Yelena is saying that in her dream, sometimes she can either have a visit from her son, or she can go over to visit him. So both of those things can actually happen in terms of what Swedenborg says as well. We can have these visitations from the other side, but we can also go over to the other side to visit with our loved ones or angels. Or is that correct?
Yeah. So if we've got a spirit and they've got a spirit, their spirit can come to wherever our spirit is, and then we would be able to see it. But yeah, you can, Swedenborg experience all the time having angels come to him and saying, come and we'll show you something. And they would go off together and go visit where they lived or visit some kind of important, he would go to these centers of learning and learn sort of what angelic thought was like in the afterlife at that time. He would go and travel to different communities, see how they thought, what they believed, what they felt. So that seemed to be Swedenborg's experience, is that there's times when he would be working on his writing and things and get visitations where he was, and there's times when he would go out traveling and meet people there. So absolutely, there's both.
That's beautiful. Regina is asking a question, and I know that you had kind of already talked about this, but I just want to kind of reassure her from what you're saying. She says, this is very interesting. My son had talked about, oh, excuse me. No, sorry. That's not, I skipped. How do we still reunite with our loved ones who have passed before us after our own death when we reincarnate as well? But from what I understand, you're explaining that Swedenborg believed that we go through gestation period, our lives, and then we go through almost the reincarnation on the other side, the different levels of learning and understanding. So we don't have to worry about ever missing our loved ones because they're going to be there no matter what.
Yes. Yeah. You never are not you. You're never not you. Your child is never not them in particular. Like I said, you can never be anyone other than who you are. You're unique. And the kind of cycles and things that people go through there are not like you forget who you are and you forget. This is more like you go from being full of love and wisdom to falling on some hard times and then having to learn humility and things. But no, there's no oh, like you'd see in a movie, like, who are you? I've been your mother. Like according to Swedenborg, there's not that. He never hints at it. He says that instantaneously, even though people don't look exactly like they did on Earth, because he says there you really become an image of who you are. So whatever you love, that kind of shines out from your face. But even with that, you recognize each other instantly, because what you recognize is the love, that the same love and the same wisdom that's in them. So no, he never describes anybody. He said I've talked to everyone I've ever known who has died, and he never ever had trouble finding anyone, and nobody didn't. You have a perfectly intact memory. There's a spiritual memory that's in your spirit right now that has absolutely everything in it, never loses details. So all the interactions you've even had, all of that stays with you, and the connections are there. So I would say yes, according to Swedenborg, there's no need to be worried about missing somebody as they go and reincarnate or become someone else. He never said that that's something that happens. It's, you are who you are, you're instantly findable, and we are made to live together forever. That's what the human condition is meant to be.
That's beautiful. Well, I just want to say that Suzanne Giesman, who is a huge supporter of helping parents heal, came up with the term for a bereaved parent, shining light parent, because the light of our kids shines through us. Shining light sibling also applies for you. And I just think that what you're saying aligns very closely to what we believe. Sue is asking a question. I guess that maybe Swedenborg didn't talk about past life regressions, but she's asking if multiple incarnations don't happen, how does that philosophy explain past life regressions? So
yeah. No, he did. He actually did. And so this is why I love what you were saying in the very beginning. I'm not saying you all have to believe what Swedenborg said about the afterlife, because I'll just give you what his philosophy was, and you can take from it what you want. But he did mention, he says, you know how I was mentioning before, we're constantly surrounded by angels and spirits. Like he calls people who aren't yet angels, who are still kind of in training, he calls those spirits. He calls people who have gone farther angels, because we're constantly surrounded by the spiritual world. And as I said before, in the spiritual world, you can share love directly, you can share feelings directly, you can share wisdom directly. The mind, you can kind of download each other's minds. He talks about in his works that there are people who remember things they've never done, but that's because you're tapping into the memory of other spirits. So it's not, so you may well remember something that never happened to you, but it's not because you did that as a different person. It's because, just like right now, I can go watch a video of something that I never did because someone else was there and they recorded it. So this is the same sort of thing, that you're actually able to experience someone else's memories as if it's your own. And he said in his writings, that's what leads some people to think we live multiple lifetimes here, but it's not so. That's not how it works. Again, that not everyone agrees on that, but that's the explanation he gave for that, for why past life regressions would happen and feel really real, because they are real in a sense, but you're getting to experience somebody else's memories as your own.
I just have to say that this has been a wonderful evening. Jojo kind of sums it up. She says, everything Curtis is saying has brought me so much peace tonight. All of the things I worry about, he has given me so much reassurance. And then Ranjina says, thank you. I've been so scared that I won't see my son after death if he reincarnates before my death. I think that that's also something that's very reassuring about the teachings of Swedenborg. Everyone's saying thank you. We have just about a minute left. Do you have anything more that you would like to say? And one of the things I want people to know is that they can listen to you all the time. You have 1,000 YouTube videos, is that correct? 1,000 that are available right now?
Literally true, at least 1,000. Yeah, if you just go to youtube.com/offtheLeftEye, you can learn anything you want to know about Swedenborg. Leave a comment on any of our videos and we'll get back to you. We have a moderation team that looks it over. So if you want to know anything, that Off the Left Eye, or youtube.com/offtheLeftEye is a great place to start. Or just search Swedenborg on YouTube and we'll pop up. There's not many people making videos about him.
That's wonderful. Again, well, definitely. But this has been such a wonderful evening. I know that Irene has also enjoyed this. We always ask everybody to say thank you and good evening. But before that, maybe Irene has some words.
No, just thank you. This was great. I love it. It's very reassuring, and it's a great place to get a lot of information. So thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. So everyone, you're welcome to unmute and say thank you and good evening to Curtis. And Curtis, get well.
Thank you, Curtis.
Thank you, Curtis.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Curtis.
Thanks very much.
And everybody.
With
you.
Incredible.
Curtis.
So grateful.
Everyone.
Thank
Have a
you,
wonderful
Curtis.